This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk. Folks, we've got a must-listen-to program today, as you will be hearing information that is, well, it's not going to come from your nightly newscast here tonight. Information you need to be made aware of as we see what is transpiring in the world around us in regard to the coronavirus and the response to it and the agenda that's going on behind the scenes. It's shocking to see what is taking place. For instance, we just learned today from CNSnews.com about the McHenry County, Illinois Health Department that has been ordered by a court to provide the names of all COVID-19 patients to the police. To the police. The coronavirus has brought many individuals out of the woodwork, and it's resurrected a push not only towards socialism, but also globalism. As we have reported, there are certain individuals that are calling for a new world order, a one world government. Some are calling for a controlling global government response to the pandemic. We recently reported about the UN Secretary General wanting a 10% of the Earth's planet's annual income in a fund to respond to this virus. We've heard of agendas pushing mandatory vaccinations, digital vaccine certificates, a national coronavirus surveillance system, population control, and so much more. And the question many ask is, where is all of this headed? What are the details behind the things I've just mentioned here? Well, joining us today to speak on COVID-19, a global conditioning, we welcome back to Crosstalk Gary Kah. Gary is the founder and director of Hope for the World. He's the former Europe and Middle East trade specialist for the Indiana state government. It was in 1987 he was invited to join the World Constitution and Parliament Association, one of the organizations involved at the forefront of promoting the world government agenda. Well, during the next several years, he obtained detailed documents that demonstrated the push toward a one-world government was active and rapidly advancing. He's the author of En Route to Global Occupation and the New World Religion. Gary, welcome back to Crosstalk.
Hi, Jim. It's always good to be with you.
Say, Gary, we've got a ton to unpack here today, and you've put it well in an article. We'll tell our listeners how they can access that. But I've heard from many that the liberal press is just trying to fan the flames of hysteria across the nation. Is this hysteria, is this accidental, or is there something more behind it?
Well, they're using the virus, which it is a very serious virus. It's very contagious. It's much more deadly than a typical virus. But they are using this as an opportunity to push their agenda. They just can't resist it. It's the way it is. These people, the globalists, they seize every crisis. You know, you've heard the saying, never let a crisis go to waste. And just last week, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, when he was speaking at a press conference, he accurately stated, he said, crisis forces change. And I thought when he said those words, I thought there's a lot of truth behind those words. I don't know if people caught that or not, but it's true. That's how globalists use any type of crisis possible to advance their agenda, because they can get a lot more mileage out of it during a crisis scenario. And so if they can use or manipulate this virus to help collapse the economy, or at least get things down to a point where they can introduce the new global system that is waiting in the wings. You know, you can't do that when everything is humming along, going really well. Mm-hmm. Just a couple months ago, we had 3.5% unemployment. The stock market was at an all-time high. Try to introduce a new world system under those circumstances. It won't happen. People won't accept it. And so I think they see this virus as an opportunity to really try to drive the global economy into the ground, and then introduce a one-world currency monetary unit, and just redo it all, bring us into the New World Order, if you will.
You know, Gary, I find it amazing with this. We have public officials that are now saying we will never return to normal again. Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, just quit saying those very things. We're never going to return to normal again. There's going to be a new normal, which is nowhere like what we've experienced before.
Well, that may be true. And what I wrote in my article recently that just went out this week is the quicker we can get through this crisis, the better. From start to finish, it could be over in 25 to 30 days if everybody is very careful and refrains from infecting anybody else, and that would rob the left of their narrative. It's hard for them to keep pushing this agenda if all of a sudden everything gets better. And so they have a vested interest in dragging this out and doing what they can to amplify it and make things seem even worse than they are. And if that is the case, if it gets dragged out into the summer months, a lot of damage can be done to the economy between now and then. And I think it will be very difficult to get things back to where they were. I saw last week one study said that at least 5%, if not 10%, of all restaurants will never open their doors again. They're going to stay closed because they were somewhat close to the edge already anyway, but if they're shut down for a couple of months, they're toast. And so if you apply that to some of the other industries, a new normal after we get through this, it could be unemployment being 7 to 10% or something like that. But getting back to 3.5%, probably that's not going to happen even under the best of circumstances.
I'd like to quote from your article. You write this: President Trump's best argument for re-election has been the record-strong economy. Take this away from him, and the odds of a far-left candidate winning the White House this fall increases dramatically. And then you state, with a patriotic pro-Constitution leader out of the way, the stage would be set for a socialistic president to lead us into a global government, complete with a cashless international economic system. Let me ask you, Gary, are you just being sensational here? You want people to read the article, or is this really the pathway that they're trying to lead us?
Well, since Trump has come into power, he has not only taken a stand against the globalists, but he has actually begun to undo some important pieces that they had put in place. And so they absolutely cannot stand the man. I think that's become crystal clear to anyone who sees what's going on. And he's actually gained some in popularity over the last few months. And so when you look at someone like Joe Biden, who's really having trouble, struggling, speaking in front of people and saying some things that come out backwards and so forth, he's going to need some help, or else he's not going to get in. And the best chance that the globalists have is for Trump to run for re-election on the platform of having a really bad economy, because that's the one thing that he could, regularly boast about, and that's basically been taken away from him. So now it's all up to how he responds to this crisis and how much, how quickly things can go back somewhat to normal, where people begin working again. So there's a lot hanging on all of this, and you better believe that liberal Democrats are going to do everything they can to make Trump look as bad as he can. And I'm not going to go to bat for Trump on everything. He says some pretty outrageous things, let's face it. But when it comes to globalization, the man has been super patriotic and loyal to the United States. He has put our interests first, and he's exposed the globalists. Just today, just a couple of hours ago, I caught the news flash that he has stopped funding to the World Health Organization. I've been calling for that for years. I can't believe we finally have a president who's done it. That organization is stacked at the highest levels with socialists that don't have our best interests.
Gary, and I want people to listen to what you have to say here, because I'd like to bring this World Health Organization, WHO, into our conversation, because the president, as you said, he's indicated we're withholding funds from this organization. This is a group that's been had a very pro-communist China bent to it as well. Help us understand, who is this World Health Organization? What is their role in the mess that we're in today?
Well, the assistant director of the World Health Organization is actually from China, where he worked at the highest levels of the Chinese government in the health area. In other words, he would have known all about this coronavirus, what's going on, how it could spread, and he's one of the main players at the top of the World Health Organization. But the number one top guy, who is Tedros Ghebreyesus, he is originally from Ethiopia. where he was a socialist revolutionary. He was the leader of his party there at one time, if I remember correctly, but a very powerful political individual from Ethiopia who's very close to China and has been for a very long time. So you've got the top two leaders in the World Health Organization largely marching to the drumbeat of China. And so for them to play down early on the coronavirus, that helped China out a lot, but it did something else. It allowed it to spread. And they were actually against Trump when he tried to shut it out of our country, and so was the liberal left-wing media. They jumped all over Trump when he kept the boat offshore and didn't let it dock. And now they're acting like he didn't act soon enough.
Yeah.
And you just see the hypocrisy. And I really hope people do see through this because it's pretty clear. I mean, it really is. So, again, the World Health Organization, it's more than just about the health, too. They're on board with the global green movement in a big way, and they want to dramatically transform and empower the World Health Organization to where it would really have draconian-like powers. And so we need to be aware of that, too. So I'm very thankful that President Trump stopped the funding to that organization today. And I just want to say this real quick, Jim. Not all the people who are in that organization are bad. There are people in the lower levels. They're just doing their jobs, trying to get a word out about how people can be more healthy and that kind of stuff. But the higher you go up in the organization, the more corrupt it gets. And at the very top, it's bad news. It just is. There's no other way to say it.
Gary Kah with us today, founder and director of Hope for the World. Gary, tell us about Event 201. This is not some conspiracy theory type thing, as some claim it to be. What is Event 201?
Well, there are a number of dignitaries, powerful players, actually, who are allied with the United Nations and Ghebreyesus of the World Health Organization, are using this convenient health crisis, as I call it, these opportunities that come with it to advance their one world agenda. These people agree that global problems demand global solutions. They want to use them to usher in world government. And so with that backdrop, let me share about a meeting that was held in October of last year, October 2019, and it was called officially Event 201, a global pandemic exercise. And really the purpose of this gathering was to game out the response to a global virus pandemic, like a dress rehearsal for it. And those who supported or attended Event 201 included, these were the main players, the United Nations Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, NBC, the CIA, the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine / Bloomberg School of Public Health, and, get this, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention.
Oh, my.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. When I saw that, when I was doing my research, I had to do a double take. I thought, you have got to be kidding. This is less than 2 months before this virus surfaced in China, and you have all these people, all of them globalists, by the way, meeting together in New York, strategizing for how they will handle a global pandemic. And some of the things, and I'm quoting now directly from my article.
Tell you what, Gary, we're at a break. This is a good spot for the break to happen, and we're going to come back and talk about this Event 201, a global pandemic exercise taking place just a couple of months before the pandemic. Very interesting indeed. Gary Kah is our guest. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, when did the Ice Age happen?
Chris, the Bible doesn't mention the Ice Age by name, but it probably occurred in the several hundred years following the flood as an after effect of the flood. The waters then were probably much warmer than today and would have easily evaporated, pumping great volumes of moisture up into the atmosphere, where it would then condense and fall as snow. The snow continued to build up and packed into ice, which then could flow south, but it certainly didn't cover the entire globe. This would have been happening up through the time of Abraham. Job lived about the time of Abraham, and in the book of Job, ice and snow are mentioned more times than in any other book in the Bible. Job lived in a warm area, but he knew about the ice up in Europe. The ice age would have continued until the oceans gave up their excess heat. And that all happened back in Genesis.
To learn more about creation, get our free DVD called That's a Fact. Call us at 800-628-7640 and mention the promo code FACT.
COVID-19, a global conditioning. Our topic today with guest Gary Kah, who is the founder and director of Hope for the World, who will be giving out his website where you can get more information on this very issue. It looks like we're going to scratch the surface on it. Gary, you were telling us about Event 201, a global pandemic exercise held in October 2019, and that break came just as you were going to introduce us into some of the matters that were coming up during that time.
Yeah, at their meeting in October, really their goal from me looking into this and researching it and watching some of the clips on YouTube from that meeting, it becomes clear, and it's to control the entire narrative of a global pandemic from the top down. That's what they want to do, centralizing the flow of information and flooding the media market with their designed messaging, if you will. And the bottom line is it's all to manage and modify our behavior. So at their strategy session, they called this focused, I call it propaganda technique. They called it flooding the zone. Those are the terms, the words that they used over and over, flooding the zone. In other words, information coming at us from every angle with the same messaging, the same drumbeat, pushing us in the same direction in a managed and coordinated way from the top down. In my opinion, we're witnessing a very intentional internationalist agenda at work at this moment. So I don't want to downplay the coronavirus. That's not what I'm saying. It is dangerous. We need to be very cautious. My daughter and son-in-law are on the front lines here in Indiana working at the hospital dealing with all this. She's an RN, and our son-in-law is a respiratory therapist. And so we get a play-by-play, and it's real. But there's an agenda behind it. There are globalists who are using this to try to take our country in a certain direction. And once we go down a path far enough, we'll hit a point of no return when it comes to globalization.
You mentioned the names of Bill and Melinda Gates as far as their involvement in this Event 201. They've had some ideals that our listeners need to be made aware of as well, and how that even circles back to where we are today.
Yes, for many years now, Gates has been supporting all types of globalist ideas and concepts when it comes to economic development and also in the health field, especially when it comes to vaccines and how all of that can be used as a platform to further globalize our world. And so whenever I see that foundation behind something, I always double down and take a look at what they're doing and look at some of the motives behind it and how it ties together. And the guy is great at making money. He makes money off of everything, and I won't take this away from him that he gives a lot of it to charities. But typically those charities are also part of helping to further a global agenda in one way or another. So it all kind of plays off of itself. I just wanted to tell the listeners, if seeing is believing, they can still watch, as of today, a good part of the Event 201 that's been posted online. They can go to www.centerforhealthsecurity.org /Event 201. If it hasn't been removed yet, if it's still there, it will shed a lot of light on how they operate. But a lot of these people, I think, Jim, they've convinced themselves they're doing a good thing. We're not necessarily talking about people who are Satanists who are going to intentionally usher in the Antichrist here. You're looking, I mean, that may be the case with some, but we're looking at people who have convinced themselves that this is the best way for humanity to go. And if there's going to be some type of global government and we're moving in that direction, they might as well have input in how it comes about and direct it And, they think it'll help bring about world peace because countries won't have militaries anymore as they do now. When you have one government over the entire world, you don't have countries fighting each other, that type of thing. That's their reasoning. And so for what some of them believe are very good reasons for global government, they feel like they have to pursue this agenda. The only thing is they realize they have to deceive people along the way by creating certain narratives and keeping the full truth from the public. So even at some of these levels where people think they're doing good to help bring about world government, deception is still being employed, and they ought to realize that. And I think many of them do.
I want to be sure I've got the website out that you gave, and last you saw the video was still there, centerforhealthsecurity.org/event 201. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you can go an additional /videos.html, and that should take you right in.
Okay, very good. Gary Kah is with us here today. I'm going to leapfrog to another topic you have in your report. You indicate that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and Pope Francis are working side by side to advance the globalist agenda. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, they've had numerous meetings. They know each other quite well. Guterres of the UN is a former prime minister of Portugal, and a lot of people are not aware of this, but he was also the Secretary General of his country's Socialist Party from 1992 to 2002. So here's another guy who's a full-blown socialist. From 1999 to 2005, he served as president of the Socialist International. Now, those people who are listening, who are researchers, will recognize that organization. This is, I'd say, you can say this with a high degree of certainty. It's the most powerful globalist network of far-left individuals and organizations known for promoting radical Marxist views and policies around the world. The Socialist International, he was the president of that group, and he is now the UN Secretary General. So it should not surprise us if you see the top of the UN working with the World Health Organization and other UN agencies in pushing a globalist agenda. But right now, Guterres is working hand in hand with the Pope in pushing various agendas, whether it's on the environment or global education, doing whatever they can to prepare the world for this coming new world order. Francis has quoted Guterres regularly. In fact, last week in his blessing from the Vatican, he quoted Guterres' call for world peace and unification. Ultimately, it's all about unification, anything to unify. And, you know, there is a good kind of unity that is scriptural that Jesus talks about in John chapter 17, unity, Christians coming together on the truth. But there's also a false unity. And a good example in the Bible was what took place at the building of the Tower of Babel. That was a false unity, a dangerous unity taking place, and we know how God responded. He intervened and scattered the people, because you would have had the first type of global government system over the known world put in place if it would have been allowed to continue. So there's a good unity and a bad unity. And the Pope and Guterres, they're pushing a global unity in conjunction with a world government, a centralization, which is very dangerous. And so we have to be aware of that. And the Pope plays a very important role in all of this, because he's been pushing the unification of the religions through numerous meetings that he has held. And people need to understand that if there's going to be a political and economic world government system, it will be virtually impossible to pull that off without some type of unity among the world's religions. If you can't do that, it's just not going to work. And this Pope understands that very well. And so he announced a couple of months back a new campaign, which is called the Global Compact on Education, that he himself is heading up. And he wants to officially launch this on May 14th, although that date could change some because of the virus and the impact it may have. He likes large crowds, and right now it'd be difficult to gather a large crowd in St. Peter's Square for him to make that announcement. But we'll see. It's supposed to be moving forward beginning on May 14th, and this will be a further conditioning of people around the world through public education and through various religious organizations to prepare us for this coming New World Order.
Gary Kyle with us today, and we're going to jump to another aspect of your article, Gary, in which you tell us about a push that's going on to go cashless and a cashless society. What's happening under the surface here?
Well, again, you've got the World Health Organization involved in this. You have the Pope involved, too, if I can come back to him for just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to mention this and forgot. He spoke at last year's World Government Summit that was held in Dubai. That was the actual name of the conference, is the World Government Summit.
Mm.
And so they talked about the economic side of all this in a very powerful way. And so the Pope is aware of all that and is not doing anything to go against it. But back to the World Health Organization, they have issued a call for people to refrain from using banknotes, bills, because of the possibility of COVID-19 clinging to the surface of physical money. Now, credit cards, which are made of plastic, they can actually retain the virus even longer. And so the World Health Organization is encouraging digital and contact-less point of sales as an alternative method of payment. So how convenient. Here we have this crisis, and they're ready to go to say, let's get away from cash altogether and even credit cards, and let's just have contactless points of sales. And this is all part of, in my opinion, of ushering in, ultimately, a cashless system. And a lot of the pieces for that have been in place, almost all the pieces, really, for about 18 to 20 months now. And so the global banking industry that is part of this agenda, they're waiting in the wings for the right moment to introduce all of this. And I'm not going to predict when that's going to be. Only the Lord knows. And maybe he will grant us some more time. But what is certain, in my mind, is that these people are now going all out. They smell an opportunity here, and they're going to push it as far as they can. But until our current economic system collapses or at least falters to a large enough degree that it's deemed as being ineffective and out of date, they're not going to be able to sell this to the public. So I believe a big part of the agenda is to push the economy down and get us ready. Central banks in many countries are already preparing for a switchover. The Bank of Canada made an announcement within the last 6 weeks that they're moving toward a digital currency, at least preparing for that. When it finally comes out, when you will have a global currency, the way things are set up right now behind the scenes, it would be the SDR currency, digital currency, and it stands for Special Drawing Rights. And for several years already, some of the international banks have been settling their accounts each week using the SDR currency. So it's already being used in a limited way, and it's going to utilize distributed ledger crypto technology, which is, of course, readily available. So again, almost all of this is in place. They're just waiting for the right time. And I would just add my own opinion on that. The SDR currency, that doesn't really ring well, and I don't know how people would respond to it. So I wouldn't be surprised when this finally all happens that they might rename this international currency something like the Earth dollar or something like that ties it in with the global environmental, the global green movement. I have no idea of that. It's just an idea that came to mind because, I don't know, SDR just sounds like a mouthful.
We're going to take a quick break. Folks, we've got more information to share, and we're going to hit ID 2020. We're going to be talking about digital ID and vaccinations and a new technology that's been labeled the quantum dot tattoo. More when we return. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Cemeteries and mausoleums are evidence of the sad reality of death, and that each of us has a divine appointment with death. According to surveys, Americans overwhelmingly believe that heaven exists and believe that most are going there. A small number believes that hell exists, with only 0.5% believing they will go there when they die. What if those who do not believe in hell die one day and find they made a tragic and eternal mistake? In the book, Hell is for Real, author Gary Frazier discusses the separation, the suffering, and the sorrow of hell, along with future events that will unfold. There is much information given by movies, television, psychics, and even by many religious circles. Gary presents scriptural truth on this important topic. VCY is making available the book Hell is for Real as our way of saying thank you for your support of $15 or more. 2 copies for a donation of $25. Just ask for it when you call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Gary Kah is our guest today. Kah is K-A-H. He is founder and director of Hope for the World. Gary, I can tell, I'm looking at the clock, we're not going to get, we're not going to get through. We're going to look at some of the high points of your article, but I want you to tell our listeners how they can read this article that we're referring to here today, COVID-19, a Global Conditioning.
Right. You can go to our website, which is simply GaryKah.org, and my name is spelled G-A-R-Y-K-A-H, so just GaryKah.org. And on our homepage, you'll be able to click on this article. We just posted it, COVID-19, a Global Conditioning. And if you have time to read the article before that as well, it's Game On. That's the name of that article. It's Game On. And it deals a lot with the Pope and some of the things that he's involved in quite in detail.
Okay, again, that's Gary Kah, K-A-H.org, GaryKah.org. Let's talk about ID 2020. What exactly is it?
Well, here again, you have a group of influential globalists. They've come together in what is called the ID 2020 Alliance, and they are doing their best to develop a digital ID that every human on the planet will eventually need to do just about anything if they have their way. Based on the ID 2020 Alliance Manifesto, which was drafted back in 2018, by the way, in partnership with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. The UN is always tied into this somehow. This coming digital ID is going to be touted as, quote, a fundamental and universal human right, end quote. In other words, they expect people to be clamoring over each other to want to have this.
To be marked, to have this ID, it's a human right.
That's right.
Wow.
That's how they're going to promote it.
Wow.
Anything bad they promote is something good. They try to snooker people into supporting something that ultimately is going to do them in. On September 19th of 2019, this elite body, which consists of various government leaders, technologists, global banking representatives, distinguished members of academia, UN agencies, strategic private sector companies, they all convened in New York City for the ID 2020 Summit. And you'll notice so much of this, ironically, has been coming out of New York. Mm-hmm. Event 201 was in New York.
Headquarters of the UN.
ID 2020, New York. One of the reasons is that's where the UN is, and the UN is involved in a lot of this. And now we have New York being the epicenter for COVID-19. But the purpose of the summit, stated purpose, is to explore the potentials and challenges of digital identity. And so this particular summit was sponsored by the UN Office of Information Communications Technology, the UN Refugee Agency, the International Telecommunication Union, and the Danish Mission to the United Nations. So, again, tightly connected into the UN. By the way, listeners can learn more about ID 2020 by going to their website, and it's simply id2020.org. But in summary, here's what I found after studying the site and doing some further digging beyond that. The most influential members, Jim, of ID 2020, of the ID 2020 Alliance, are Microsoft. There again, you got Bill Gates involved.
Yep.
Gavi, which is an acronym, GAVI, which stands for the Global Alliance of Vaccines and Immunizations. The Rockefeller Foundation, Accenture, the UN and international banking leaders, as well as the World Economic Forum, which plays a key role in all of this because the World Economic Forum has been providing a special platform for launching ID 2020's programs. And Bill Gates is also heavily involved with the World Economic Forum. Last January, January of 2019, the Alliance launched the ID 2020 certification mark at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the certification mark. So listeners are probably thinking, okay, so
what is that? Yeah.
Mark all about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in short, the ID 2020 certification mark is intended to further digitize global commerce and serve as a stepping stone toward a personal digital ID for every man, woman, and child. And I quote them. They say, a unique convergence of trends provides an unprecedented opportunity to make a coordinated, concerted push to provide digital ID to everyone, end quote. And, of course, this current COVID crisis is a perfect opportunity to try to lunge all of this forward. According to researcher Parker Clausen of Harbinger's Daily, I want to give him credit here. He's done an excellent job of tying the 2020 agenda in with the push for vaccinations. He says there's a close link between the pursuit of digital ID and vaccinations. He writes, and I quote him, with an equal drive to get everyone vaccinated, Gavi, the Global Alliance of Vaccines and Immunizations, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation play a pivotal role in the ID 2020 Alliance's mission, end quote. And I just want to go a step further. At their 2019 summit, ID 2020 unveiled its latest program, and now I'm quoting directly from ID 2020. Recognizing the opportunity for immunization to serve as a platform for digital identity, this program leverages existing vaccinations and birth registration operations to offer newborns a persistent and portable biometrically linked digital identity.
Wow. Wow.
So, this is powerful stuff. I mean, We're looking at a complete change in how everything's done here, where everything is going to be digitally centralized, and if you're not in this system, you're not going to be able to do much of anything.
Yeah.
So all of this is leading up ultimately to a mark, I believe the mark of the beast spoken of in Revelation. This is all a forerunner to it.
Gary, you also talk about this new technology. So you've linked together this digital ID and vaccinations through their own quotes. This is their words, and your article is even footnoted with this. But there's also a new technology labeled the quantum dot tattoo. What exactly is that?
Well, it's interesting to note that this quantum dot technology was requested by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in order to solve the issue of not knowing who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been, allegedly. This is why they want it. So it came out of Rice University. It's a new technology. It's a type of tattoo. They call them the quantum dot tattoo. This tag consists of tiny microneedles that deliver a vaccine and then dissolves the sugar-based needles and leaves behind a mark or like a barcode-like tattoo. And that mark leaves a record of the vaccine that had been received through an infrared-like dye pattern that can be read by a smartphone. And so, again, this is a type of a step in the direction of having a contactless personal identity. And I mean, once you're at that step, you're right there. I mean, and having the mark spoken of in the Book of Revelation, the only difference being that you have to have that mark in order to buy and sell. And I just want to say something here. There's never been a time in human history where every person in the world had to have a mark on their right hand or on their forehead in order to be able to buy or sell. Never. Mm-hmm. So when this finally comes about, it should be fairly clear. People won't be able to say, oh, this isn't that mark because of this or that. If everybody has to take a mark to be able to buy or sell, you're dealing with the mark of Revelation. This is a stepping stone to it. It takes us right up to that point, really.
Wow.
And I think that's a sign of the times. It lets us know how close we really are to all of this being able to happen, just as the Bible prophesied.
Gary, we're seeing some quite oppressive government restrictions, even right now with COVID-19. We could take a whole program just to say what's going on in different states, but you indicate you're expecting even more government control and less personal freedom. Isn't that just the opposite of what President Trump's position is?
Well, it is. And that's one of the problems. He's pushing back. There was a deadline for everyone to have a new driver's license.
Yeah, the real ID, yeah.
Yeah. And when all of this went down and everybody, the globalists were trying to shut everything down left and right, after first denying that there was a problem, mind you, and so then license branches, they're not open right now.
Right.
And so it's difficult to get this new digital ID driver's license. And so Trump comes out and announces he's going to give everybody at least another year of time, all the way till the fall of 2021. And so that was a little stroke of genius, I have to tell you. The globalists hate that. And so whatever they try to do to speed things up, he does something else that tries to set them back. And I hope, and we need to pray for him, that he continues to do that, and that he sees through the narrative, because they're throwing a lot of stuff at him from different angles. And if he makes the wrong move, it could actually play into their agenda. And that's a whole other matter. But we have to be very careful on all of these fronts, and as Christians, pray for discernment, and pray that President Trump and Vice President Pence would have discernment on all these matters as well. We were talking off the air for a few minutes, Jim, and I mentioned a big concern of mine that I just want to throw into the mix right now. I have spoken to two very large farmers in the last 24 hours, one from Canada, one from the United States. And they told me they are very concerned. Both of them are Christians, and they're very large farmers. They said that meat processing plants are being shut down left and right. And I asked the one farmer, why is that? What's going on here? And he said, well, in some of these cases, just a couple of people have the COVID-19 virus. In one case, it involved people in the administration building who never even go into the plant, and they shut the whole thing down.
Wow.
And so a lot of this just doesn't add up. And then my friend in Canada mentioned that 70 to 80% of all the meat processing in his province is either owned or controlled by the Chinese. And I said, you're kidding, because I initially said, you think a certain percentage of this is controlled by the Chinese, like maybe a third or so? Is that why? And he paused for a moment, and then he said, no, it's closer to 80%. And so over the years, not only have the Chinese come in and taken over production of our antibiotics, it's a well-known fact now. I'm sure everybody listening has probably heard that they produce over 90% of our antibiotics in China, and over 70% of our acetaminophen, and many other drugs. But that's not the only area where they've been taking up more and more control. They've been buying up land and farms in the United States, sometimes through front organizations, and especially during the Obama administration. It came in like a flood during that time. And so now we've got, in some states, a majority of the major production facilities are owned by the Chinese or close allies of them through their front organizations. And I believe the powers that be operating behind the scenes want to get us to the point where not only do we have a health crisis and an economic crisis, but where we actually experience a food shortage as well. So without being the least bit sensational, I will just urge listeners to keep a good stock of meat on hand, because there may be a shortage coming a couple months down the pike.
Sounds like the implementation of the Green New Deal. Folks, we'll be back in a minute. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
For the Worldview Week in Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewradio.com. My friends, behind the coronavirus pandemic, there seems to be an agenda that involves Planned Parenthood and the Marie Stopes International. These are groups that, according to numerous reports, have received massive funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Well, we know that Planned Parenthood was started by someone into eugenics, Margaret Sanger, who referred to people of color as weeds. We also know that Marie Stopes actually wrote a letter to Adolf Hitler long after it was evident what his worldview was all about. Many of these people, like the Gates Foundation, are now calling for population control and reducing the population. Numerous reports reveal that some of the vaccines that have been produced and given to folks in third world countries have caused those women to abort or caused them to become sterile. My friends, we need to be aware of a eugenics agenda behind the global vaccine program.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America, and friends, I apologize, but we have so much information, the vital information to get in your hands here, so to speak. We are taking this program to just expound the information. I don't believe we're going to have time for phone calls here today. I know you probably have questions or comments on this, especially reporting what's going on in your neck of the woods, ladies and gentlemen, but I would like to refer you to Gary's article at GaryKah.org, GaryKah.org, GaryKah.org. Also, because of the volume of information in this program, it's one of those things you're going to have to re-listen to gain it all and to share it with others. And I'd like to recommend one or two things. Number one, within just a couple hours, this will be posted on our site at CrosstalkAmerica.com. Get the link, share it with others, CrosstalkAmerica.com, or if you'd like a hard copy, a CD copy of today's program, call our switchboard at 1-800-729-9829. They'll give you the details, 1-800-729-9829. We do make copies of our program available on CD for a donation of just $6. Gary, I'd like to just harken back because some decades ago you were involved as a trade specialist in Indiana state government, and what you saw happening then were the seeds of what we're seeing take place today. And before you respond to that issue, also, some many years ago, we received a public service announcement from the World Federalist Association. John Anderson was the speaker, calling for world peace through world law. And this, again, was the conditioning of people. This was sent to TV stations all across this nation, sent to radio stations. It's only 25 seconds long. I want you to hear this, and folks, listen in.
Hello, I'm John Anderson, president of the World Federalist Association. We believe in world peace through world law. How to achieve that law? How to achieve that goal? We believe in an empowered United Nations with the kind of institutions that can give us global governance for global problems. We hope that you'll join us in that effort to help shape a better future for all of us.
Now, we received this many years ago, and Gary, again, what he has said there, that was laying the groundwork. What you saw happening in Indiana state government was also laying the groundwork. It was seeds were being planted for what we are seeing come into fruition today. We've got just about 5 or 6 minutes left. Share with us your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, the World Federalist Organization, I stumbled onto them all over the place. They're very dedicated to the cause of world government, and in a sense, they're almost like a public arm of the United Nations. Pretty much whatever the UN wants to do to help bring about world government, they help to bring about, and they'll sponsor meetings around the country. And, of course, the people that come to those meetings are largely globalists already to begin with. And so they make certain decisions at these meetings and then approach the UN and basically say, hey, we the people of the world, we want you to do this. And then it gives the UN the opportunity to act in the name of the people of the world. So it's a kind of a bottom-up and top-down approach to the push for world government. And the World Federalist Association is very big in all that. And in fact, right after I left my job with the Indiana government, after finding out about the push for globalization and being invited to join certain organizations, one of the organizations eventually that I was in for a time was the World Constitution and Parliament Association. And there were leaders of over 200 different other organizations who belonged to that group, all of them favoring world government. There were people from the World Council of Churches, the Global Green Movement, the World Federalist Association, the World Muslim Congress. They covered all the religions, all the different bases. But the top three leaders in that organization at the time were also members of the World Federalist Association. And so I probed deeper into that, and I found out that the same three people also belonged to World Union, which I had never heard of that organization before. I traced it to India, discovered it was very occultic, and was a sister organization to World Goodwill, headquartered in New York City and London. Now, if that rings a bell, that organization was founded by Alice Bailey, who today is often referred to as the mother of the New Age movement. And back in 1921 or 22, she founded a publishing company, and she called it Lucifer Publishing Company. And then 2 years later changed it to Lucis Trust, and it still exists today. And again, when you do the research into this and get to the bottom of it, what is ultimately driving this movement, some of these organizations are just one or two steps removed from people that founded organizations under the name Lucifer Publishing Company and the like. And so there is a spiritual motivation behind it ultimately. And some of the people involved in the One World Movement don't even know that. They're just involved on the political or economic side of things. And that's the deception in all of this.
Gary, and we've got just less than about 2 minutes here. I don't want to leave on all those. Are we beyond hope as a nation?
No. Number one, if we act quickly and we get through this crisis scenario and President Trump makes the right moves, I don't think we'll make a complete recovery, but maybe this agenda, this globalist agenda, can still be pushed out some. It's iffy. We don't know. Only time will tell. But we are never without hope, spiritually speaking. And I close my article with a message of hope, because this is so important, because people can be frightened by all these, this information. And I write, when we live in harmony with the Lord, each day moving forward step by step in a close personal walk with Him, His Holy Spirit gives us a peace that passes understanding. Knowing that we are at peace with God and that our eternity is secure in Him, this is where our hope comes from. The Lord Himself is our hope,
Amen.
Our rock in whom we trust. And that's what we need to remember. Our hope, we're strangers in this world. The Bible tells us that.
Mm-hmm.
We're aliens and strangers in this world. We're here for a time and then we're gone. But if our eternity is secure because we've placed our trust in Jesus Christ, then it doesn't matter what happens to us in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, in eternity, we're going to be there with the Lord. And in times like these, we need to remember that, because
Amen.
It's easy to become overwhelmed by everything going on in the world right now.
Amen. And ladies and gentlemen, that boils down to the question, do you know Jesus Christ as your Savior? Have you placed your trust in Him? If this is not a wake-up call for you, I don't know what it's going to take, but we encourage you to go to God in prayer, confess your sin, recognize Jesus Christ paid the price for your sin on the cross, receive Him, place your trust in Him as your Savior. We're out of time. Gary Kah is our guest here today. Go to the website, GaryKah.org. You can download the entire article, read it there, GaryKah, K-A-H.org. And if you'd like to obtain a CD copy of today's program, call 800-729-9829. Gary, thank you for your research, and thank you for your enlightening our listeners on so many critical issues.
You bet. Thank you, Jim.
Gary Kah, our guest here today. Again, GaryKah.org. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from CrosstalkAmerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.
With SRN News, I'm John Scott. Democrats are hoping to cut Senate Republicans out of the negotiations over a new round of funding for the Paycheck Protection Program.